Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the artist of AdventureMan over at Image Comics, as well as the cover artist to The Stars, amongst a great many other things. It's Terry Dodson. Thanks for coming on, Terry.
Hey, David. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm pleased to be here and good to talk to you again.
So we are recording this on Thursday, June 6th, and you recently returned from a grand adventure to Italy for Lake Como Comic Art Festival and then Paris for some additional gallivanting. Are you fully unjet-lagged yet?
Yeah, I think so. I've been home, 10 days now. I'm good. I actually would have been okay, but I came home with a slight cold, and that's just kind of just now going away. So that lingered. If it hadn't been for that, I would have been fine. But going that 9-hour time difference is huge for a West Coast person overseas, because by the time everybody's going to bed, it's only 3 o'clock in the afternoon for you. So I do a really good thing where I stay on their schedule. I go to bed at 12, at their time. And the problem is then I'll wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm just off. So that goes on for days. And, the show starts at 10 in the morning, which means it's really starting at 1 o'clock in the morning on my body clock. But I push through because it's fun. It's a beautiful place I'm at. I'm having a good time. There's just a lot of positive stuff going on. Plus, it's just you're there on a lake. It's not like a typical convention, so the energy is really good. It's very relaxed. It's quiet. So I'm able to go right into performance mode or whatever I need to do, even though I'm jet lagged. Though I look at the photos of me from the fan photos from Como, and oh man, I can see how tired I am. It's hilarious.
Do you just look like The Walking Dead?
Yeah, it's awful. Yeah.
This is a horrible thing to say because no one is ever going to believe me, but I used to think that I was actually immune to the powers of jet lag. And I would do the same thing. My thing is always set your body clock to the local time as soon as you get there. So stay up till 11 or midnight that first night, and you're going to be good the next day. That turned out to not be true. And it was just the follies of youth. And I could do that in my 20s and my early 30s. But now, my wife and I went to France last year. And when we went to France, I was like, I'm going to be great. This is not going to affect me at all. And then the next day I was like, what is wrong with me? Why am I dying?
I'll say that doing it like I do, where I'm doing the conventions and then just out enjoying time with people, where I'm out doing a lot of stuff, eating and just seeing things and being so interactive. It really removes the jet lag as far as having any ill effects on how I feel. I just am physically jet lagged I am physically not getting sleep when I am there. There's just no getting around it. But mentally and everything, I'm great. It's so stimulating and so much fun. It's both that and the Paris part of it. Paris is, I think I've been there for 20 times now. So it is literally like a home away from home for me. I know so many people there. I have so many connections, friends, places that I've stayed, places that I eat. I literally get on the ground there and I know where I am and what I'm going to do. And it's unlike really in any other place except where I live now, to be that level of comfort. It's really strange. But I just accept that that's the case because I can just feel the ease when I get there. Mm-hmm. So I think it really helps that the very first trip I did a signing with Album, and I also did a meeting with Humanoids. And on that trip, I got to meet all these people from Album who are still there or moved on, but are still in France.
Really quick, Album is the comic shop, Album Comics.
Correct. Yes. The album that sells albums. Yes. Album Comics on Saint-Germain in Paris. It's one of the best comic shops in the world. But that initial trip, I met so many people and made so many connections on that the next time I went, I kind of built off those connections. And so by now I have so many people to visit with or go drop in and see or have meals with that I actually have to kind of stagger it out and can't let everyone know that I'll be there because I can't see everyone. And then I usually do a lunch and a dinner with someone different each one of those days. And so, it's a good problem to have, but it's like I got to make sure that I have time just to walk around and do nothing because as an artist and as with the travel fatigue, and then just being somewhere else and being in Paris or being in Como. I just need out a couple hours by myself different times, just doing nothing besides walking and looking and taking pictures and painting and drawing, etc.
That's why I was a little surprised that, when we were emailing, you said you're like, oh, I could do it while I was in Paris. I'm just like, why though? You're gonna have so many other things to do. But this all has had me thinking. I think one thing that's interesting about you is, I don't know what the right way to say this, but I'm going to do an estimate. I feel like 1.5, how it's like, you have 1 foot in this place and 1 foot in that place. I think you have 1.5 feet in the US comic world and then like zero point 0.5 feet in the European world. I don't know if it's 1 and 1. I feel like it's kind of more split leaning towards the US because you published books there, like you had one through Glenat. And then, God, who was the other? Didn't you have somebody through somebody else?
Humanoids was my first book, and then 2 books through Glenat.
Yeah, for Glenat. And so you've had books there. You seem to have a very European-friendly approach. It seems like people really connect with you there. It is kind of interesting. I feel like that's kind of unusual for U.S. artists to kind of work in both markets, but it kind of has seemed like it's always worked for you.
I love the European market. I love the U.S. market, of the Japanese market, but I love the European and the American markets the most. I think, well, how about this? I know that my art style fits better into those two markets, and I have been a fan of that stuff since childhood, really. I mean, almost as long as I've been a fan of American comics, I've been a fan of European comics. It's like if you take a percentage of my life, it's almost the same amount of time. Because Tintin came in not long after I started reading Star Wars comics. In junior high, Heavy Metal was coming out, and then Marvel was bringing in the Epic line that had a bunch of European flavored stuff. And then it wasn't long after that, the Dark Horse, still around this time period, started doing their black and white reprints of all the great European artists. So by the time I was a freshman in high school, I'd been pretty much exposed to everything, both American and European. And I think I just kind of saw it all as the same. I saw it. I mean, I could see what differences there are in each market, depending on the subject matter, especially. But I love the fact that the European artists would do everything themselves, and I think I always saw that as how I would want to do my own comics. I understood the Marvel system, or the corporate system that we work in here in the U.S. The each person has their stage, and that's how I got into comics that way. I knew in order to get a job, I had to be specialized in something, but I always knew that I wanted to do everything. I always wanted to. I mean, I just liked the way those books looked. They're just the beauty of the European books when it's all done by one person. That vision is so strong and it's so unique. That you can't imagine anybody else coming in and coloring Mobius. I mean, or lettering them or whatever it is. It's just. I think that my enjoyment of the artwork was a leading factor to be able to work in both places. And then my art education is fine art. It's oil painting and figure drawing. The bulk of formal learning for me is old school classical art. And that's all. So much of that is based on European painters. The majority of what I like painting wise is late 19th century impressionist, post-impressionist, which is mostly French stuff. Mm-hmm. I didn't occur it to me at the time that it was French or whatever, but the fact that I go there now and see all that stuff, and my color schemes, the way I do everything is so influenced by European painters. It's the same thing. I assume most artists in Europe are being influenced by classical arts, and then they like to do the comics or the animation or whatever also, but they have that classical upbringing from simply living among it. I think that may be the other tie with me that links is that I didn't come from a background of just wanting to be an animator for Disney or just wanted to draw Spider-Man for Marvel. It was I really wanted to be a painter / artist or creator, whatever that was. I just knew I wanted to do more than just the one thing.
So it's influenced your colors. It's influenced the way that you draw. I know it also has influenced certain things like AdventureMan. AdventureMan comes out in more of like an album-sized hardcover when it actually comes out in like the collections. Are there other ways you think that kind of the 1.5 feet in US, 1.5 feet in European market, do you think that manifests itself in your work in other ways?
Yeah, I'd say like something like the AdventureMan book size thing is pretty superficial. I mean, that's just me simply copying European stuff, but it's cool because I like it. But
it's pretty atypical for US though.
Oh yeah, of course,
and it's great.
Oh yeah. But beyond that, what I think has really happened since I've started working in Europe for 20 years now, it's the storytelling. It's completely changed how I tell stories on pages, how I lay out my pages and tell the stories, how I set up scenes, how I have everybody act. That is like 95% influenced by European artists. And no, I think I really lucked out that there were so many guys working in America that were European too. I mean, there was big favorites of mine early on was like Carlos Pacheco, Olivier Coipel, which is newer, but Olivier's hugely influenced by European stuff. And there's more guys I'm blanking on now. There's a lot more Spanish artists that were like this as well. But I think those guys had that sensibility, which I gleamed onto in the Marvel stuff. And then it just echoed it seeing the European stuff, seeing how they set up pages, how they establish scenes, how they break the panels down, the size of the figures in the panel, when you're doing a close-up, when you're doing a pullback. There's all these rules they kind of stick to that are much different than European or than American artists. And I just started bringing that stuff just naturally into my American work. I don't do it exactly the same, but it is a huge, huge influence. I'm 20 times whatever, X infinity better storyteller now after working in Europe. I mean, I learned so much on on the first book I did, the Coraline book I did. I just completely opened my mind to storytelling. I think up to that point, all I really cared about was designing a cool page and drawing pretty images. But I think I'd lucked into having some kind of a natural storytelling ability because I was not trying to tell a story. But a lot of writers wanted to work with me, so I obviously was doing something, just naturally. But I was definitely not trying to tell a story. So it wasn't until I started working in Europe that I was really trying to tell a story first, and then everything else kind of came along. In Europe, telling the story is the number one approach. It's all about telling the story.
Okay, I did want to talk about Lake Como Comic Art Festival, which you were just at. And the thing I think is interesting about that con is con, I feel like con is the wrong word. It's a festival. It's arguably the greatest collection of art talent and most unique comic event for original art fans you can find. But one of the things I think is interesting is it has a lot of artists that are very successful in the US market, but also ones who are much more successful in the European market. So you kind of have a little bit of both. When you're at that event, which for listeners that don't know is a very unique event in the sense that it's capped at, I think, a maximum of 1,000 guests, attendees, and typically has far fewer people than that attend. Its guest list is a who's who of artists, and it's at this crazy setting in Italy that's incredibly beautiful. And also like things like the chair. There's a chair in front of each artist's table where you can sit and watch the person work. Do you ever find yourself roaming? I mean, as much as you can, given the time commitment you have to doing sketches and remarks and everything like that. Do you ever find yourself going and seeing if you can find somebody who really excites you and just kind of watching them work and learn from them?
I have one more common ground that links my American and European stuff, and that I haven't mentioned yet. But I have in 2004, I was approached by Gallery de Neuvième Art, the Gallery of the Ninth Art, which is Bernard May, who runs a gallery in Paris. He was buying some Harley Quinn pages from me in San Diego. And I showed him my Coraline book when I was still working on it, and a year or two before it came out. And he saw those pages and he goes, "Oh, I have a gallery in Paris. I'd love to do a show for you with this artwork." And so we did. But out of that, when I first went to my first gallery opening there in Paris, I got to meet Juan Garnido. I got to meet Jean-Claude Messier. I mean, there's so many cool guys that my gallery guy represented that very early on in my European career or whatever, I got to meet all these people who I love their work. And I just got to meet them not as a fan, but as an equal, because it was at a gallery opening or whatever. So that happened. And so in these 15 years since then, I've got to meet most of these people already. And only maybe, I think everybody who I still hadn't really got a good conversation with, I still had at least met, because there were a few people at Como who I did have conversations with who I really wanted to. And I did actually had met them once or twice before. But this is the first chance I had to just stand and talk with them. My favorite, the guy I really, really wanted to talk to was Matthew Lafray, who did Long John Silver with my Red One writer, Xavier Dorison. But that guy was a guy who did my Star Wars covers back in the 90s. And he's been doing just... obviously European comics is a big name there, but he was a guy who I love his stuff, and it was amazing. This is how this kind of works at Como. So it's maybe the last hour or two of the show, and I finally took a break to go walk around and talk to people on the floor itself. And he was the first person who I saw that I wanted to really talk with, and we just stood in front of his table for 20, 30 minutes talking art. No one bothered us.
Mm-hmm.
were right there with people walking around us, and we were able to talk in depth about why things are being done on pages, because I had a couple questions for him, and he answered these things, and no one bugged us, wanted our autographs, or got in our way. We just had an amazing conversation, and it was great. So that's an example of how you can approach everyone there at that show. The other thing is that a lot of us stay in the same hotel, so we have our breakfast together. And again, since my gallery owner knows all the European guys every day. If I didn't know the guys, got to meet them and say hi to them and talk with them. And then with dinners every night, I did make sure that I was out with a different group of people, as many European or non-Americans, I should say, as possible, just because the chance was there to be with these other groups of people. And I'm pretty sure I did that every night. I think maybe just one night that was the Jeff Loeb dinner, where it was a good mix of us. But even then, it was still a huge group of people.
Was he back this year, Jeff?
He was there.
That's the funny thing is I remember when I was working on that piece about Lake Como Comic Art Festival last year, I think you brought up Jeff, and then I reached out to Steve, one of the two people who runs the event. And I was like, so how did Jeff Loeb, how did he end up there? And he's like, he just bought a ticket and went, just like everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, that's the funny thing about this event is it's like, it's such a big deal for original art people, because you can go there and like, everyone is doing like unbelievable commissions. Like when I talked to Sean Phillips wasn't just doing like pen and ink commissions. He was doing paintings. And this was last year's one. And I don't remember how many you ended up doing last year, but I remember you were saying that you did just like the number of like remarks and sketches and everything you did was like basically as many as you possibly could fit into that weekend, because people are just drawing, because that's what people are there for, right?
Right. And in a good way, in a comfortable way, in a fun way. There's no, you're not stopping to do autographs or do sales or having loud noises disrupt your conversation. You're able to just actually sit there and do the drawing for someone, so you can get them done really quick. And everybody's patient and happy to wait as long as it takes. I kept telling people, like, oh, just come back, because I'll have time to get everyone's done, and it basically worked out that way. I avoided doing a giant finished piece. Like I did one bigger piece, and that was it. Everything else I kept to a smaller size, just so everybody got a decent sized piece and everybody got a drawing. And it's really cool. I mean, I took no commission lists. I just would sit down and take names that morning, get rid of that list, start a new list in the afternoon. Did that 4 times, and it's very freeing, and everybody gets a sketch, and it's a very positive atmosphere for everybody.
You said earlier a phrase that I don't think I've ever heard a creator say, but I imagine everybody has their own version of this to a degree. You said at conventions you go into performance mode. What is that?
Yeah, well, what I do at home has nothing to do with how operating a booth or behind a table at a convention. There's no correlation between me sitting at my desk doing storytelling, solving problems, and drawing pictures. At a table, I am talking to people the whole time, which I do not do at home, and multiple people, and having to remember everybody's name, and which the thing is, it's all great to do, but it is a completely different skill set. It took me years and years and years to kind of switch onto that set, because it's not something I do normally. Just because in my happy time, I am by myself, drawing or creating. That's my happy place. But I love being with people too. So when I am there, I really try to enjoy it and really try to maximize my time with everybody there, and everybody who is in front of me. I try to give them my full attention, ask them, who they are, what they do, learn those little things about people, because I find that interesting, and you never know what someone's going to say that you find exceptionally interesting. But yeah, it is definitely a performance. It is. You have to smile all the time, because at home I do not have to smile all the time. I just don't. My face. So before I got an assistant at San Diego, which I did in 2015, I got an assistant in San Diego in 2015 and New York 2015, because those shows were getting so long and so exhausting that I could no longer smile. I mean, my face was just worn out from that level of exertion.
You got to hit the face gym. You got to work on those muscles, Terry.
Yes, I don't. And that's the thing. I work on my body muscles. Those are the ones I need most of the time. I don't need that many facial muscles. But Man, it's a different thing, but I so appreciate everyone being a fan of my work, and that's the reason I can do what I do is that I have fans who buy our work and our artwork and support us, and without them, I would not have this job. So I feel it's my duty to give them my best, the best me that I can give to them. So, and I've learned to pose for photos and I've learned to smile and keep my eyes open. So, it's this level of stuff that these skills that are, I've had to completely develop, so.
I tabled at New York Comic Con for an hour at a time, I think 3 times this year, and it was the first time I'd ever tabled anywhere. I don't think that you can adequately prepare somebody to understand what you're going to be doing there because you feel like you immediately, I don't know, I felt like I immediately became a different person. Like that performance mode hits and you're just like, okay, I got to be on. I got to be keeping eye contact with people walking by just in case they might be interested, especially for somebody like me. Nobody knows who the hell I am. People are going directly to your table. And it was a really interesting experience. But I am, you told me via email, you have San Diego Comic Con coming up. You have Terrificon, which I'm not actually familiar with. And then you also were going to go to Supernova, but it seems like you probably passed on that given the fact that you're not on the guest list and that is happening this month. I've actually been to Supernova, believe it or not. I went to it in Melbourne. And it's a very unique convention. It's very pop culture oriented. I don't know if you've ever actually been to one.
We did in Melbourne in 2013. It's been a decade now. It was awesome.
It's a pretty cool event. I went in 2011, but they're all like those 4 things: Terrificon, Supernova, San Diego Comic Con, and Lake Como. All very different types of things. Do you have different performance modes for each, or is it all just the same type of flavor?
I'd say it's all within a certain flavor because you're still pretty much dealing with people the whole time. But I think at a show like San Diego, there's so much chaos, so many. You can get like so many people at one point that there's like 15 people that you're kind of carrying a conversation on at one point. Como was extremely relaxed. There was a little bit of problems sometimes with communication. I mean, not bad. I mean, the number of people that speak English, or at least some English, was pretty good. But that's basically a one-on-one, very quiet atmosphere. Terrificon I haven't done, but Terrificon is it's a 3-day show at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut, and it's John Citrus loves the show. I mean, it's a big not pop culture. It's a big superhero comic book kind of show, which I've never done. And so once they moved it away from San Diego, I said I would do it, and so this is the first time that they've done that. So
I like the name.
Yeah, Terrificon. It's like it seems to be a very Marvel DC oriented kind of show, mainstream comic show. So I just assume I'll be sitting there signing books for 3 days because I've not been to that market.
That is the interesting thing. I just had Humberto Ramos on the podcast, and we talked specifically about conventions and why he goes to them. Like some he goes because he wants to go to the place, and some he goes to because they're going to be good for business. That's the thing, was like Lake Como is going to be serious art collectors, and San Diego is going to be like a mass of like a little bit of everything, and Terrificon's can be like signatures. And it's interesting how each has this like slightly different flavor that they offer you.
Yeah, actually, everything that Humberto said, I agreed with 100%. I was listening to him say all that stuff, and it's like that's exactly him and I do the approach stuff the exact same way.
Yeah,
as far as shows go, and we've spent a lot of time together the last few shows too, so I know that for a fact. It was hilarious listening to that conversation because it's like we have the exact same philosophy. It's like we have this opportunity to travel the world and be guests. So the shows that we do just to go be a guest in Hawaii or Australia or Europe, even in parts of the U.S. I've not been, I'll go. But there's parts of the U.S. I'll go also specifically now because I've never been there. I went to Houston 2 years ago because I'd never been to Texas, and there was a show there, a 1-day show that was at a brewery, and they had me at brewery, and I showed up. That was great. I did a store signing too, but that was amazing. But that kind of thing where it's just a fun opportunity. And then there's just my standbys. There's Emerald City, San Diego, and New York, which are the 3 shows I do every year regardless. They're big shows. They're territorially different, and they're different types of the year. So I really can hit those 3 shows and feel like I can be done. And then I try to throw in a European event more as a vacation. and then one or two small, store signing or a smaller show like Terrificon or something like that. Like next year's, I really need to hit Heroes because I haven't been to Heroes in like 8 years, 7, 8 years. I actually turned that one down as well, just because I thought it'd be smart to take this month of June off and just work because I have lots to do.
I'm going to San Diego for the first time. I'm going to be very interested about the experience because I've heard a little bit of everything. Like, it depends on the person. Some people love it, some people hate it. But I guess I get to judge for myself next month. And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Looking for the right place to read digital comics? You can find it at Omnibus. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses all day and date. It's just like a comic book shop where you pay per book, but digital. And the team at Omnibus has massive news. It's now available everywhere, including iPads, iPhones, Android devices, and its web reader. However you want to read comics, you can find it on Omnibus and all in your pocket. Looking for an ideal digital comic book store with an excellent shopping and reading experience? One that uses novel discovery features that helps fans find their next new favorite book, and one that features many of the best publishers, including Image, Boom, Dark Horse, and more? You can find it all on Omnibus at omnibus.app. And now, back to the show. Let's get into one of the things I really want to talk about, which is when you emailed me about coming on the podcast and we're going to talk about stuff, you had this list. It was a big list of things you had going. You had AdventureMan Ghost Lights. You had A Story in Amazing Spider-Man number 50, which just came out. You had your art book, The Art of Rachel and Terry Dodson, not just shipping to Kickstarter backers, but also being available through Diamond in June. A CGC signature series signing you and Rachel are doing, as well as the cons we mentioned, and a creator-owned title that you have coming up in August that is really, really unique, and we can't talk about it in specifics quite yet. That is an interesting mix of things. It's kind of interesting in the same way that the mix of conventions is interesting. And it kind of feels experimenty isn't the right word, at least in part because I don't think experimenty is actually a word, but it seems like you're trying a bunch of different things right now. Is there a reason for that? What's driving that?
I think I have to be inspired to do what I do. So I have to keep working on different projects and different things because I get I get bored quick on working on anything for too long. So that is, I think, having those different experiences, different projects, different lengths of projects, especially doing creator-owned stuff, it's super important for me. The Spider-Man thing, it was like 8 pages, and that was kind of like, oh, that's a good length for me. I've drawn this stuff so much. If I put myself on for 3 or 4 issues, I might be in trouble. But finding the projects where I can do my best work, or the things I can go do that allow me to be the best who I can be. Project that's going to be coming out in September is only just a one shot. That's a creator-owned thing that's just a one shot. So that allows me to not commit to so much that I know I'll get burned out. AdventureMan, we've now got back to this year. It's 3 issues, but it's this length that I feel like I can give my absolute best. And after that length, not the length necessarily, but just the fact that now I've worked on AdventureMan. I started AdventureMan 7 years ago. I don't know if anybody knows that because it didn't ship till 2020, but it even shipped 4 years ago. It's been 4 years now exactly since the first issue of AdventureMan came out. So I just need to keep myself fresh and excited. So by pulling back and figuring out how much I can do that keeps me excited is really important. I just well, I don't know if I mentioned it in that email though, but I just came off a year and a half doing character design for a video game that ended in April. So that ended. So my schedule kind of freed up. So I have time to do, I think a lot of what I'm doing is because that's my schedule's freed up again, and I can do back to what I want to do. And I love drawing comics. I love creating new stuff, and I love drawing comics. I mean, that's my happy place. If I get to go to conventions or go travel because of it or whatever, that's the total bonus.
You didn't mention the video game. What's the video game? Can you say that?
It's called DC Heroes United. I think it's going to be coming out this fall. Can't remember the exact date. But I did, so it's the DC superhero characters. And I don't know what's been announced about it, so I can't say much. We had a minor announcement for it at San Diego last year. So if you go to I think it's on my Instagram, you can click through details to find more about the specifics of it. But it's a DC superhero universe game, and I got to design every single figure in that game. It's really cool. The entire from the main cast of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all the way down to street figures, so characters on the street. And they had 3 modelers who were building everything that I designed. So that was very satisfying to go from to design an entire universe and then be able to see it all be built up as well.
That is a very unique experience.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was 100% digital work because when you're doing design work, working on with in digitally is the way to do it because you can do so many versions of so many characters with so many color choices that if you're doing that analog paper, you'll just never you can't keep up with. In my opinion, the advantage of digital is that you can be as creative as you want to be because you can't slow yourself down. Where on paper, there's times you can't come up with as many ideas because you simply cannot get them down as quickly. Where you can copy and paste quickly in Photoshop or in Clip Studio, which is what I use to draw in, and then to drop the colors in so quickly on stuff and go, any idea that pops in my head, I can do it. There's no stopping. I can just give them 30 ideas instead of like 3.
Yeah.
Like in the same amount of time. So it is such a great way to design for business, for commercial, for corporations. We'll put it that way.
So you said earlier that like, for example, you passed on Heroes Con because you wanted June off so you could actually do work and you could do that stuff. I'm sure you have a lot of opportunities that are presented to you. Like you had the game come up, that was something you wanted to do. I'm curious as to what leads your thinking when it comes to potential projects. Do you think art first? Do you think career first? What leads your thinking when it comes to that sort of thing?
The first thing is I have to be excited and want to do it.
From like a creative standpoint.
Exactly. If that's it, it's rare that I'm still thinking I'll have to pay an obscene amount of money for me to go. That sounds okay, but because I've done enough of those where I just don't enjoy myself and I'd just rather not do it. Mm-hmm. So even when I do commercial jobs, even like the video game, I've done enough jobs where I know what they're going to ask of me, and I know whether it's worth it or not. The video game job was worth it because I knew what they were going to ask of me was they wanted me. I was hired to do me. It's like, okay, this like at the rate that I want to work at, they pay that rate, and I can be myself and get that experience. It's completely worth it.
That's the best of both worlds, right?
It is, and I worked on an animation job about less than a year before that as well, and that was a pretty similar experience. Not as full control of my style, but on that other job, by being limited a bit, it made me learn a lot, and it really forced me to learn to sharpen up my digital design skills. Which, as much as I color digitally, I don't draw digitally per se, but now I can. Though I still prefer paper and pencil. But I guess to answer your question, yeah, it is definitely 100%. I have to be excited to want to do it. That is 90% of what I do. I generally feel like I have a good instinct on what is successful and good for my career. It feels like I will always go through all those. I'll go through all the factors when I make a decision. I mean, I research everything. If it's people I'm working with, I'll research those people, those writers, whatever it is, the company I'll research. But the gut instinct on being excited and wanting to do it, getting out of bed in the morning and being excited to create and do my best work, that's what I want to do. I'm always looking for that project that just keeps me motivated and improving because, as an artist, we are always unsatisfied. We're always trying to get better. And the only way to do that is, you got to work on something. You got to push yourself. But subconsciously, I think I'm pushing myself because I'm excited about what I want to do. And I want it to look better than what it looks like today. Tomorrow it'll be better, so I feel like I'm not like, God, this has to be good. I'm just thinking I got to impress myself. I want me to be pleased with it.
Is risk to some degree an appealing part of it? Like, for example, let's speak abstractly about your project you have coming in August. It is the type of thing that is very unusual for comics, period. And it's the type of thing that has fundamentally low risk to it because it's like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's fine. But at the same time, it's also risky in the sense that it isn't like, I don't know, it's an unusual project and it's not something that people necessarily typically do. Do you find yourself drawn to things that are a bit more unusual or like risky in a way that it fits your desire to do something cool and something that pushes you, but also it pushes you in the sense that it's not just like I could draw Spider-Man again or something like
Right.
that.
Oh, 100%. I actually, with the creator own work I'm doing, I really try to make sure each one I've done is a 180 from the one I did before, and especially a 180 from anything I've done for Marvel or DC. The Corleen book, was what it was, and then from that I went on to the Red One, which was this 70s Russian spy, and then on to Adventure Man, which was this mix of pulp stuff, to the one I'm doing now, which is a complete 180 to anything that's been done before in any medium, as far as I know.
It still feels like you though.
Yeah. Oh no, there's definitely stuff in those. There's all those things. There's that. How about this? I have a wide range of tastes, I
That's
guess.
true. That's true. Yeah.
That's, that sounds bad, but that I don't just like, I didn't ever want to just draw Spider-Man or draw Star Wars comics. I want to draw new stuff. I always wanted to be, I like a lot of different things. It takes, and again, I think not only that do I like them, but it takes that interest in other things to keep me excited and stuff and to be a better artist. I think that just goes hand in hand. My level of curiosity fuels my creativity, I think. And then I think the whole risk thing is just the fact that I'm working on something that I've not seen before or I've not done before, but I feel like I do have to feel like I can do it though, because I have had risky alternative kind of projects come up that it was hard for me to see it. I've maybe even started on them and realized I don't I don't have I don't have the answer for this project. But the ones that I have done that I've stuck on, I could see what I would do. Once I can see in my head what it's going to be, that I know that I'm going to do it. It's gonna happen. It's a good way to work. I'm always within reason doing something new and something that challenges me and something I learn something new from. And not only the topic itself, but I have to do something new, storytelling wise, design wise, or drawing color wise. I mean, there's all sorts of aspects that you like art directing, I guess, that you're doing on each project. And so each one of these new projects I do is a brand new. I'm a brand new art director.
I do think that one thing that's interesting about it, again, I'm going to speak very abstractly, is you met your collaborator because you both happen to be nominated for an Eisner Award the same year and you happen to both be at the same table. And that was the reason, that was kind of like step one to this becoming a thing, or at least you being involved with it. And I think the interesting part about that is you have the things you like, but you also want to do your 180s and do different things. But you also have to remain open to opportunities, it seems, because you never know where they're going to come from.
Yeah, actually, that's almost like a guiding principle I've discovered in my career is everything that I like that I've done that has been successful, or at least I've been happy with it, have been jobs that have come up out of the blue. The jobs that I didn't pursue, the jobs that I've tried to make happen and pursue have all been okay. Never as good as what I thought they'd be, as opposed to all the jobs that pretty much were just cold calls on me. Like, Terry, do you want to do this? It's like, oh man, I didn't think about that before, but I would love to do that.
Well,
Harley
Adventure
Quinn,
Man came out of X-Men, right? Like you and Matt
right,
and X-Men.
right, and we were put together by Axel in that book. I didn't pick Matt. I mean, once I saw it was Matt, it was Matt and Ed Brubaker. And once I read what they're going to be doing, it's like awesome. A Harley book. The Harley book, I'd actually been drawing Harley stuff, so that was almost like meant to be. But I definitely didn't approach the Harley book, but that came out of nowhere. Me drawing Spider-Man Black Cat, I didn't care about Black Cat, but the fact that I could see that I could draw a really cool Black Cat along the line, the Wonder Woman project, all my creator-owned stuff has been like that. I just I've lucked. I don't know if it's luck, but I guess knowing the right ones that I will do the best work on and keep me inspired. I've had a good job of picking those projects. But again, like I say, there's been a couple of these things that I've tried to make happen. And most times they don't end up happening because at some point I realize I'm trying too hard to make this thing happen and it's not going to be what I thought it was. And so my momentum is gone.
So one thing I think is interesting about your situation is you can't, I mean, I presume you don't just make unilateral decisions. You're like, Rachel, we're doing this. You're part of a team that is your inker/wife. And so I am curious as to how much you talk about this sort of thing. Like, what is your process for figuring something out together? Because if you're like, I want to draw this Pantera comic for some reason, and she's like, I hate Pantera, I can't do this. I have no idea why Pantera is my choice,
Right.
but this is what's happening. What is that process for figuring that out? Because I imagine you both need to be inspired for it to be a fit.
Right. Well, the good thing that Rachel says is that if I'm inspired, I do good work, and if I do good work, she's inspired to ink it. That
Interesting.
is what her bottom line is. Because within reason, she really doesn't care what we do. She doesn't read comics. She doesn't really read comics. She reads comic strips. It's not to say she didn't know what's going on, but she's so far removed from the world of comics that I will have to explain to her. Actually, a lot of times I have to have someone explain to me what I'm doing. I can have her to get on who is this on this cover again? Because I do so many covers, so a lot of that runs into the covers that we do. But I'll have to explain to her what this stuff is and why we're doing it, why it's a smart move to do this thing. And once she understands that, then she's cool with it. But she is my soundboard for all this stuff. She is the person I run by most of the stuff, unless I've already said yes. Then I need
Yeah.
to have a really good reason. She's like, why am I working on the weekend doing this stupid thing? It's like, oh, okay, these are the reasons. Okay, okay. It's within reason. She's pretty open to what I have to say. I mean, I put a lot of thought into when I say yes or not. And I've learned the hard way that I've said yes too many times to things that I shouldn't have. And it shows when she has to ink it that I did not have the time or the enthusiasm. And so she's right. I mean, she needs to make sure that or I need to make sure that I'm happy with what I'm doing, so she's happy. And once that happens, it's great. And especially like for her, it's giving her the time to do the best work she can do. Because in the time that we've been working together, she was much faster than me when we started. I think I was just really slow. And now she's kind of like the exact same pace, but I work so much faster. So I always plan things out, knowing I'm designing it, drawing it, she'll ink it, then I scan it and then I color it and do all the corrections and I do all the editorial, deal with the editors and all that stuff. All she has to do is just ink it. And but generally I schedule her like an extra week just to make sure she's not rushed, because the level of work she can do when she's just working at her pace is phenomenal. And it keeps her happy and it keeps the quality of the work up to, A plus level work.
I mean, it seems like as long as you bring your A game, she's probably in good shape. So the baseline is that motivation level. Like, are you inspired? If you're inspired, she'll be inspired and has a cascading effect down the line for the work.
Yes, in theory.
In theory.
That worked for the first like 15 years or so. And then I think her level of enthusiasm for working weekends,
Yeah.
etc., which I do not blame her. So the fact I definitely work a lot more hours than she does, which is good for her health and everything. So she's a much happier person not working all the time like I do. So there's that. So even though because we were running into problems where I was way ahead of her doing my best work, and all of a sudden I realized, oh, she's not inking as fast as she used to, or whatever that was. She wasn't putting the hours in. Maybe it's the same inking, but she just wasn't putting those hours in, which is completely understandable because it's not healthy to work that hard. And so there's just things that happened over a few years where we kind of realized, give Rachel time.
Yeah. Well, and find a balance that works for everybody,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I don't blame her for not wanting to work weekends. I don't want to work weekends either. It is interesting to think about all this through the prism of the art book, though, because you'd previously done sketchbooks. You'd done a variety of books where you showcased your art. But this was the first one that featured both of you. It was the art of Rachel and Terry Dodson, not the art of Terry Dodson.
Right.
That's an interesting one in that art and career balance, because in a lot of ways, it is a celebration of the art, but it's also something. I mean, I just wrote a piece about this, which you participate in, which is about like why these books are happening, why there's so many being crowdfunded. And the nice thing about it is it's kind of like it's something you can do that fans can get a really cool thing from, that frankly you can make money from without putting a lot of new work into it, so to speak.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I do think it's an interesting one in that art career balance kind of Venn diagram, because it's both, but it also seems like it leans more a little towards the career side than you're used to.
Right. I guess the advantage of that whole not having to put so much time into it is that we've already put the time into it.
Yeah, exactly.
We put the years into it. So now it's like we put so many years into so many things it's like a retirement account or whatever. You're putting all that stuff in there. So someday you don't have to do it, right? So that's exactly what I think all those years of drawing all those books did is we have this backlog of all this stuff. And the great thing is it's not just Marvel and DC work, but it's our own work, our own things that we own that's been so many years that we've created that back catalog of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And after all these years, it's like, actually, it's been maybe this book should have come out like 5 to 10 years ago because we actually have so much stuff that we really had to pull a lot out of it. And we actually even basically finished designing the book 2 years ago. It just the price of shipping and printing and everything just kind of made us wait until now to do the Kickstarter because we just said this is that we were going to. It just didn't make sense. And so that book. The point of that is that there's already 2.5 years worth of work since then that we've done, not to mention the stuff that didn't go into the book the first time. So
sounds like you got to do a series.
Yeah, and yeah, I think we will. And but I think the cool thing about all that again is that the paying our dues and being able to now make money off the work that our time investment. I think that's the key thing. And a retrospective like that is such a nice thing to have someday. Here's our life and work collected. And I'll say the big reason why Rachel's name was first is that this was her first chance that she's had a book. Like you said, that everything else has always been my name because it was always my sketchbooks or my illustrations or whatever. That was always the case. Rachel only does, and for this reason, it kind of limits her, but she only does commercial kind of corporate jobs or stuff of create her own stuff. So we couldn't ever put her stuff in books. It was always Marvel or DC's artwork. And all my sketchbooks never featured that stuff. It was always stuff out of my own imagination. So, but now she gets a spotlight. And I think the other motivation for doing the book was that we're scanning her pages. And I don't think people realize what a phenomenal level of work and beauty she has on the original artwork until they see the original scans. I just don't feel like I just know this for a fact that when people come to my table at convention and they see the original artwork, they generally have to stand there and bend down and look and go and ask all sorts of questions because they cannot believe that someone's doing all that with a brush. And it's such a pleasure to hear those responses and stuff that I really wanted to make sure that for this book that Rachel was at least got the spotlight name for it or whatever.
Yeah.
And got to have all that artwork in there because it was her chance to have her moment in the sun because she deserves it because she does such phenomenal work.
You're both doing that CGC signature series thing too, right?
Yeah.
Is that the first one she's done, or both of you have done?
Yeah. And we took a long time to figure that one out, but we were supposed to do it almost a year ago, and it's just taken us almost a year and a half to get it going. Or we'll be doing it next week, actually.
Those things seem super wild. So, are you going there, or are you signing at your place?
No, that we are the one. The one catch was that we would do it here. Rachel doesn't really like to travel. Rachel loves to travel. I should correct myself. She loves to travel. She doesn't really like to fly.
Oh, okay, sure.
She doesn't like to fly, and then she doesn't like to fly on a short turnaround as well because if she is going to fly somewhere, she wants to stay there for a while. So we asked that they come here and. Because then we'd be happy to do it. And they are. So it's cool. Well, we actually can get it all done one day in the comfort of our home and get to hang out with those guys for a little bit, do the signings and sketches. And it's been great because Rachel did Seattle this year in March, but she hadn't done a show since March or Seattle 2019, I think. So a 5-year gap. So, and I've done so many shows and we've had so many covers come out. Hundreds of covers a year that she hasn't been signing.
Yeah.
And so it seemed like a no-brainer to do the
signature series
CGC
together.
Yeah. It's a nice way.
Those things are really fascinating to me because, I mean, at least I've never been to one, but from what I understand, it's basically like you'll have witnesses, which is what they call the people who witness you do the signatures. Witness you sign them, you both sign them, and then they become entombed in their slabs for CGC, saying that these are like signatures, whether you do a remark on it or whatever. And I remember right before New York this year, there was like a gang of creators like Chip Zdarsky and Jorge Jimenez and a whole bunch. I think James Tynan went. There was a whole bunch of people who went over to like some office building CGC has over there and like signed a billion things. And
Yeah.
those, I don't know why. My wife has pointed this out before, and she's completely right. I really hate repetitive things. I have a really tough time doing this. Like I hate bagging and boarding comics for that
Oh yeah.
specific reason.
Yep.
And I think I would lose my mind doing that. But more power to you. More power to you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I feel the exact same way. If you look at my signature, I do not have the same signature. I get so bored so quickly of doing that. I mean, that's how I work, though. That's exactly why I work like I do. I am not a robot. I do not do the same things. I could, I just don't. I mean, that's just I get bored way too quick.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime I see someone signing online, I just cringe. Like Scott Campbell shows himself doing these, all these comics he's going to sign, and it just makes me nauseous.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like sometimes the piles are insane. It's like I remember Tynan and like his artistic collaborators, like Werther Deladera and Martin Simmons and got a couple others. I think Alvaro Martinez Bueno was there. They all went down to like somewhere in Florida where CGC I think is headquartered.
Yep.
They sat down there for like a weekend and signed everything. And I'm like,
Yeah.
You have just described hell to me. Signing a million things in Florida. No, thank you. Sorry, Florida. I have no beef with Florida. That was a unnecessary shot fired at them. And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. The crowdfunding platform Zoop is growing. For the 20th anniversary of the Eisner-nominated Hack Slash, they have unleashed the first ever Zoop Games project, transforming the comic to a deck-building card game. If you're a fan of comics, horror, tabletop games, don't miss out. June is also headlined by the legendary Jim Starlin and the release of an omnibus for his classic series Breed, as well as Babylon 5's Claudia Christian's new release, Dark Legacies. If you ever wanted to own a piece of Zoop, now you can. They're wrapping up an equity crowdfunding campaign where your contribution earns you shares in the company, as well as other perks. Visit republic.com/Zoop to become an investor in Zoop. For creators looking to crowdfund your project or have your books for sale in Zoop's brand new e-commerce marketplace, email them at hello@wearezoop.com. And now, back to the show. I did want to ask, so you said in your past you have done projects that seemed okay to you, where there are ones you took because like they seemed fine, not ones you were super jazzed by. How much has like your decision-making process on what you do and what you don't do evolved over your career? And has it mostly just been because of circumstances and like you can start saying no to things?
Actually, what I would say is that I thought those things were going to be great, and they didn't turn out to be. Yeah,
sure.
I would say I've really been fortunate. I've been able to pick my projects since
Rock and Roll Comics in 1991.
I was gonna say, so I started working full time in comics when I was in college. I've never had to look for a comic job since then. So there's that, and then. So essentially, since that point, I've been getting called and asked to do something. So I've basically been in a position to choose my projects since then, but officially choose my projects, I'd say since 2000, 98, 97. So by the time when I was working on Generation X, I got offered Harley Quinn. I could stay on Generation X or move on to another Marvel X-Men book or go on to Harley Quinn. And so I feel like that was the first point where I was in a position, I think that was 98, and I was able to choose what I wanted to do. And they're all things that I wanted to do. It was like, which one am I going to do? And so from that, I feel like since that point, there's never been a project that I've done that I haven't wanted or chosen to do myself. The only book in that entire time that I was asked to do.
Oh, what is it?
Trouble.
No way. Okay.
That's the only one that I was asked to do.
Yeah.
Everything else was a pure choice of mine.
Interesting. It's funny. I've never brought that up to you because I kind of feel like it's this super strange book in comic book history, period, but also your career. And I don't know, is that like a little weird having this book where people kind of point to like, what a weird time in Marvel history, and it's your art that's in it.
Right. Fortunately, it's not my art on the covers.
That is true. Those are the weirdest. I mean, I've never actually. I say this with love. I've never read Trouble. It's not because I don't like you. I've just been like, you know what? I'm not interested. And as soon as I saw those photo covers, I was like,
yeah,
nope.
Yeah, no, it is. But then now I think we're approaching 20 years now since it's happened. So at this point, it's so far. Everyone's gotten the joke a few times over now, and there's actually legions of people out there that love that book. So
You know what? I'm the dude who loves Stiltman. I literally have a Stiltman figure behind me.
right.
There's somebody that loves every comic ever made, probably.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I've learned that. I have met all of those people from everything I've worked on. But yeah, trouble. In my mind, if it would have been ended up being the book that I felt that was being pitched to me, it would have it could have been even better. How's that? I think somewhere along the line we kind of lost what it was supposed to be and ended up being something slightly different. Because the first two issues I put everything into. I mean, I'm super proud of the work I did. Those two great issues that I did laid the groundwork for me to be able to do the third, fourth, and fifth issue at my so-so artwork pace, which is like the first time in my career, my entire career, where I had to actually do something where my heart wasn't fully in it. Because every other thing I've done post or before or after, my heart was all in it. But at that point, I was like, this story is a little wobbly, or the idea is a little. I'm seeing things are getting just a little. I can't give my 100% on this.
Sure.
And like I said, I'd done the hard part in the first two issues and established everything, so no one could tell the difference, but I could.
You mentioned that, like, that everybody loves every comic. There's somebody that loves every comic. What's the most surprising comic you've had to sign in, like, the last few years? Is there anything that shows up where you're just like, I cannot believe I'm signing this?
Oh boy, I don't know. There's, I'm sure. I mean,
I joked about the rock and roll comics one. Has anybody brought that to you in the last few years?
yeah. What did I did sign that for something in the last couple of years, a couple of times.
That was the first comic you drew, right?
Right. Yep. That was about a year and a half before I started working full time. I did that. This like the August between my sophomore and junior year in college, I think. I went to San Diego for the first time that year, and I got offered that job.
I remember my buddy Brandon, he went to a con in Las Vegas, and Scott Lobdell was there, and he went up to Scott, and Scott was charging for signatures. And the way that my friend recounts it is he's a huge fan of the X-Men character Maggot. And he went up to Scott Lobdell and he was like, I want you to sign this first appearance. Maggot is my favorite character. And Lobdell was so surprised that he signed it for free, because like nobody comes up and says Maggot is your favorite character to Scott Lobdell, apparently.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm trying to think about what other things I've signed. I guess at this point I've worked on so many things that
Probably nothing would stand out too much.
Yeah, I think I've signed so many at there's almost at every show I do, there's some one or two that I go, oh, I haven't seen this in a while. But you know, that's true. And there are some surprising ones that I'm surprised someone actually has this thing, that it's out there or whatever. Like they have the old black and white DC at San Diego used to do these black and white kind of samples of what the books were going to be, and so I've signed those things that people have had that I don't know if they swiped them or where they came from, but those things are kind of rare, I guess. And it's funny, like the number of those rare variant covers that even I don't know exist that I've signed. So maybe there's that kind of thing. It's like, I've never seen this before. Or actually, when you're working at Marvel, you don't get your comp for a month or two after.
Oh yeah, you don't even know it's out, probably.
You don't even know it's out. So I'm signing the book. Like I will actually stop and look through the book and go, oh, that's how it printed. Okay. Or if it's books from now 25 to 30 years ago, like I have not looked at this book since. And so I will just stop and just look, because it's like, what the heck, was I doing that long ago that I was that excited about? And so it's kind of a fun little trip down memory lane.
I'm working on a profile piece for Sketched about Peach Momoko. And one of the things that I actually manually counted this, and I'm horrible at counting, so I probably miscounted it. But based on my count, she had something like 224 covers published in 2020.
Wow.
And some of those were like virgin variants, like the ones that don't have the titling on it and everything like that. So it wasn't new art. It was just like a variation on the existing art. So it wasn't 224 pieces, but it was a lot. And right. I think that's one of the things that's really amazing about this is like when you're doing so many covers, not that you're doing 220 in a year or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not that you'd completely develop amnesia, but that you'd just be like, it would be hard to keep track of all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that's really from like, let's say 94, 95, 96 that will pop up that I almost don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, that was that cover for that weird one off that they're going to do this character meets this character thing, and
That sounds like I don't, is it amalgam or something? No, probably not
something, yeah,
amalgam. Yeah, yeah,
anything like that. That there were these oddball things that happened, and it's like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this.
yeah.
Or stuff that I did at Wildstorm. There'll be a thing that I did that I completely forgot about. I didn't forget about it. I just haven't spent time thinking about it. But it's fun. It's fun to have those pop up and see them again.
Not to make it seem like it's lesser than or something like that, because covers have their place, and I'm sure that there's something you probably enjoy to a certain degree. But do you find that having like that cover work where you can take on cover projects outside of like doing Adventure Man or doing unnamed project that's coming in August and things like that, in a weird way, do those kind of almost underwrite your ability to do the storytelling stuff you really enjoy?
They can if I don't have enough time. If I have enough time on them, then I can actually do the storytelling and the covers. And if it's not the storytelling, it is something design wise that's kind of difficult, or a color decision that makes it a challenge for me.
No. I guess what I mean is like, does doing those allow you to be a little bit more selective with the projects you take because you're going to be bringing in money for all the covers you're doing, everything like that?
Yes. Yeah. Everything that I do, I do to allow me to draw what I want to draw page wise, or whatever that ends up being. The entire way I manage my career and finances is so I can do what I want to do. And that's by doing bits of this and bits of that, and selling the artwork, and doing the covers, and doing these side jobs and books,
And why you go to
prints.
Como and max out the remarks and sketches
Exactly.
you do and everything.
Exactly. It is, and along all those lines, it has to be something I want to do. It is definitely, I do whatever it takes in order to keep me doing what I do. I mean, I am my own boss, my own career. No one else will do it for me. And so you have to, unless you luck out and on some kind of a bazillion selling book, you have to manage your career that way. Actually, I talked to Rachel about this quite a bit before I went to Europe, because I was telling her all the stuff that I was going to be doing. I said, it's career management. No one does this for me. I have to go to Europe because, hey, I'm going to Como and it's going to be fun and it'll be good to meet these people and make this money. But then I'm going to Paris because I am doing store signing. But that's just a surface thing. I'm actually there I met with 3 publishers, a writer, 2 different galleries, and then just a bunch of friends. But those other things were super long-term looking career decision things that I did. I went to Paris on purpose. It was the business part of the business trip. That's really what it was. Way more than Como was. I mean, Como was great because of the connections and stuff, but Paris was specifically a business trip.
Yeah, that's interesting, because on the surface, when you told me that, I kind of took it as like, I'm going to go to Paris because I know a bunch of people and I'm already kind of nearby, so I might as well hit that up on the way back. But instead, it's like Como was like the cool time where you get to hang out by a lake and do a bunch of cool drawings and hang out with a bunch of artists you respect, and then you had to go and sit down and do the real business.
Right. That's true. But the great thing is that the real business and in that location is just as enjoyable as the Como stuff, because all these people I'm dealing with are friends of mine, and it's just good to just talk with these people. I find the internet has allowed us to be friends with and work all over the world, but there's nothing like being at a meal with someone, sitting at a table with someone, sitting at coffee with someone, having a drink with someone, meeting someone's kids, handshakes. That's the thing. I think that is so important to the long term of your career. Is having that one-on-one with people. The fact that me meeting you in person wanes way more because we've talked before. I'd listen to you on the podcast, but once you meet someone in person, you shake their hand, you size them up, you get the real feel for the person, and so then you can actually, if you're going to be doing a business deal with that person, you can put a lot more faith and trust into who they are and your project. You go, do I want do I want my stuff in this person's hands? But once I've met them, so I think that is a huge, like, I don't know if everyone realizes how important that one-on-one time with a person is, but I find it more important a lot of times than anything else in the project, is that the people that your interactions with this person is so much more important.
You definitely went to the right place for making sure you had in-person interactions. Because when I was in Paris last year, I emailed Urban Comics to be like, "Hey, I want to talk to somebody about a piece. For a piece I'm going to be writing about France's comic world," and I got an email back from Urban Comics' editor in chief, Francois Arquette, and he was like, "Do you want to just get like lunch before you go or coffee?" And I was just like, "I'm what? I'm on vacation. Can we just do this over email?" I was like, "I guess." How many times am I going to be able to have lunch with somebody like this? And so we went and
Right.
had lunch, and it was wonderful. And
Yes,
that is just culturally much more what they do
exactly.
than what we would do here, where somebody would be like, "Why am I meeting with you? I'm just going to do this as an email." I actually like that a lot.
I mean, everybody who I met with, we all could have all could just dropped off somewhere and went away. But every single person I was with, I spent hours with. Every person, no matter who it was, from what level of friendship it was to what level of professional importance it was. I gave all those people hours, um, which was great. And it was of my own free will. I mean, it was a great time that I was having, a great experience, and especially being in a foreign country where my grasp of the language is not what their grasp of the language is. And much as I know, there's still a whole level that they're beyond me. And my enjoyment of the entire trip is increased by being able to hang out with local people and have them take me where they want to go. And I mean, Paris is a place now that I have my places as well. So I'm actually taking the locals to these places because I actually know them now. But in general, they know, I'm going where they want to go.
I gotta say, I'm terribly envious of the 20. When my 20 times in Paris, when my wife and I were there last, we had dinner at this little bistro. I think it was
Mhm.
Bistro Paul Bert, and it was delightful. And there was this couple that was sitting next to us from Florida, older couple, and they said that they'd come to Paris every year for I think the last 40 years, and they were like, "Yeah, you got it's the best city in the world. You just got to keep coming back." And I'm like, "I've been there 3 times." I'm like, I would love to. I know this is like very privileged position where I'm like, I'd like my three to be 40. Most people don't even end up there once, but I'm like, man, like hearing them talk about that and hearing you say 20, I'm like, God, I gotta up my numbers. These are
Yeah.
rookie numbers. These are terrible.
But you have to start somewhere. I would have never guessed in my 20s that I would go to Paris and then I'd go as much as I did.
Well, it's like what Humberto was saying. It's like that's the beauty of the job is it takes you places you never would have expected.
Exactly. It's never in my wildest dreams where it was anything like that in my mind, So I have definitely enjoyed it and I definitely take advantage of it because, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. And man, while I'm here today, I'm going to have a good time and enjoy and meet as many people as I can and have those experiences because, and then it sounds bad, but as an artist, I sit in front of a blank piece of paper and I need to have some idea to put on that paper. And how am I getting those ideas if I just do the same thing over and over again? But by traveling the world and meeting people, it's amazing what pops into my head. I mean, I'm actually I was pitching a new project while I was there. And so part of that was research. And it's just I needed to do this trip to go pitch this project, but part of the project actually takes place in Paris. The story does, and so even though I know Paris so well and I've been to these places a lot, it was really good to go sit in those locations and think about it again. So that kind of on hands thing was, yeah, super important.
James Tynan put it to me as he needs like the inputs to be able to make the output, and it totally makes sense.
And you don't know where you don't know where you'll get that from. And so, but I'm not getting it sitting in my desk. I mean, at one point I was pretty much auto, inspiration. I could just do it, just look at a comic. Go, oh yeah, I'm inspired now. But now I mean, I spend a lot of time on Instagram and now Kara and look, just kind of getting my buzz feed going. But I really find that it's real life that inspires me the most. That's why I spend my weekends. I've been taking weekends off now since last May. So it's been like a full year now, weekends off, which has been really nice. But I spend one of those days twice a month going to figure drawing for 3 hours a day, doing drawing figures. And then I spend almost every one day every weekend going outside and painting
Hmm.
from life. Because I can do that kind of stuff here in Oregon. So I do, but that's getting out of the house, getting away from the studio, from my comfortable, very happy place that I'm at. But it's nice to get away even from this comfortable spot that I'm in and go to those places and get that inspiration and talk with people and be inspired.
Hmm. I just have a couple more questions. One thing I was curious about is I was thinking about your career in like if you like think about it in like segments. Your first comic was 1991, and obviously this was kind of like before you really really committed. But still, 1991 was like X-Men #1, 8.1 million copies. The next year, Image hits, massive boom, does all this stuff. Valiant comes, massive boom, and then Distributor Wars, the bankruptcy of Marvel. Everyone's like, well, comics exist, and then there's an uptick, and then there's a downtick, and there's uptick, there's a downtick, there's uptick, et cetera, et cetera. And the last couple of years, there's been like, or last year-ish, there's been a lot of conversation about like, we're in another downtick. There's doom and gloom. There's all this stuff like that. How does that, the perpetual up and down motion of the industry, how does that affect your thinking? Like, does that sort of, those doom and gloom narratives ever impact the way you're thinking about things? Or do you just try to keep your world small and focused on what means something to you?
I would say I plan so far ahead and have so many lines out in the water, so many, so much bait out in the water in so many locations that if one of those lines doesn't take, another one will. I mean, I feel like I plan I have to do what I want to do. So there's that. But that means everything I'm doing is my best work. So I'm always putting out a new portfolio for myself every month, and I'm always doing good stuff. So there's that. So I'm very concentrated on what I'm doing and make sure it's the best that I can do, and that I already know 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead what I'm going to be doing next, and all those possibilities. And if this thing doesn't work out, I already have this and this going on. So all those bubbles that happened, I was aware because of the news that was happening, but I never felt it firsthand. I really, when anything bad has happened, I've had so many other things going on with my work that I did not notice that they happened. I know people lost their jobs. I know a lot of friends and everybody. I can hear the numbers. I can hear people's rates being cut and all these bad things happening and stores closing. But it hasn't affected me directly because for the fact I've been lucky to have chosen things that have persevered through those times, I guess, and set up other things.
I think the interesting thing about it though is because you're kind of long-term thinking, you're thinking about things in longer stretches of time rather than like just kind of reacting. Because of that, you not only are kind of insulated from the down times, but also in some ways it prevents you from making bad decisions during the good times, because sometimes that's what leads to the bad times.
That's funny. There are times where it's good times and I have to say no to so many things, even though it sounds amazing. It's like, well, I've already, through whatever other reasons, I've already said yes to this project. And since I've said yes to it, I will do it. And I do know it'll be good, but there have been things that have come up that I was like, wow, man, I could have really done well with this stuff. But, at the end of the day, I make that decision to stick to my principles of saying, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, And if I am going to do it, I'm going to do my best work. And yeah, that stuff has insulated me from those other outside factors. Yeah, I don't know. I do think it's being focused on the long term, and yeah, if something does go bad, that I know that this or this will be there for me to do. But it's I still feel extremely fortunate at the years that I've been working that I'm still getting regular work from not my own work. I know I'll hire myself to keep doing my career on, but the fact that I still keep daily almost I'm being asked for it by Marvel or DC or smaller companies to do something. And I just can't believe it. It's like I felt like I did all this forward planning for myself because I assumed I wouldn't be working for major publishers after a certain age. I assumed the calls would stop, and because I saw that happen to everybody. And so I just A, I wanted to do other stuff, but B, I just planned for the future that I wouldn't be getting this work. But this work still keeps coming in. And I feel like if I had assistants or whatever, I could really be making a killing just drawing on all this stuff. But that doesn't appeal to me. I'd rather be doing stuff that I want to do. So yeah, that's a surprise to me that I am still me and Umberto and everybody that's in our generation are still as busy as we are. I mean, anybody that can still draw who's in our generation feels like we're still just the same in demand as we ever were, which I don't, it seems odd to me. It seems like that shouldn't be the case.
It is kind of interesting. I was thinking about the first con I ever went to was Orlando MegaCon in, I want to say, 1996. And it was like Humberto and it was Greg Capullo and it was, I mean, George Perez was there. There was like, it was a crazy list. Joe Madureira, a whole bunch of like really amazing artists. And, you know, save for the ones who've moved on to like other industries like Joe Mad and then like George Perez, who obviously passed away. Most of the people that I met then that were like the biggest artists are still some of the biggest artists. And it's kind of fascinating and not in a bad way. I mean, like more power to them. They're very great and very talented people, but I don't know. It's a little surprising. I don't know if surprising is the right word, but it is great to see how much they've sustained. And I think that in a lot of spaces that might not be as typical, but it seems to have been for a lot of comic artists from that generation.
Yeah, actually, I had this conversation with someone. I can't remember if this is in Coma or wherever, but we had this conversation, and I think it's because, let's say anybody who came into comics, let's say in late 80s or early 90s, like all of us did, at that point, we were getting good page rates. We could sell our original artwork, and we're getting royalties. So we all came in at a point where you could actually make a living and retire in this job.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of people who've made tons of money in this job, but if you stayed employed this whole time doing comics and had a style or you worked in a way that people wanted to hire you and you could sell your artwork, I think that's why we're all still around. Because it's finally, I can't say that for people who are coming in today, but anybody who came in when we did, when those opportunities were there, I think there wasn't a need to leave. You know, earlier generations, they would go to animation or illustration or you know, storyboard gigs or whatever. And those are all things I do on the side. But it's like I add the numbers up. And if I'm smart, I can do the same amount of money doing comics. And I'm way happier. And I own the stuff. And at the end of the day, my name's on it. That kind of thing, I can't find anywhere else except just doing gallery work.
Yeah.
I think that's the huge factor, is that there's a point where the economics of it all finally caught up, where we were getting paid very well to do what we do, or at least, you know, enough to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Assuming you were smart with your career choices and your art sales, etc.
Well, and as long as the work keeps exciting you, that's the best of everything.
That is the catch. And that's, for me, that's why I had to keep expanding out and finding stuff that kept me excited. Because if I couldn't just rely on the big companies to give me jobs, I had to find something else that would get me going.
Well, I hope you continue to be excited by the work. I hope Rachel continues to be excited by the work and not working weekends. But Terry, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about just everything in your world, really. I really appreciate you taking the time.
You bet, dude. Thank you so much. That was good to talk. I had a good time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Terry Dodson. You can find him on Twitter, Instagram, Kara, and Blue Sky, and his work at AdventureMan and the upcoming The Manchurian. Big thanks to Deanna Chapman for stepping in to edit this episode. If it sounds better than usual, it's because of her. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my Eisner-nominated subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Joe, Benjamin Wilkins, Chris Hacker from the Oblivion Bar podcast, John Neesmith, John Auerbach, Dustin Weaver, Ninja Assassin Love Story Webcomic, Brandon Heyman, Aiden Hammond, Kenny Myers, JKJ Art, Faith Aaron Hicks, Ah Yeah Comics, Ben Rowe, Cameron Brown, Jonathan Breen, Danny Ollie, Charlie Stickney, Tom Drennan, Jeremy Thomas Burke, Jared Schwab, Scott Dunn, Chip Mosher, Seth Pomeroy, James McEwen, Andrew Lehman, Christina Merkler, Scott Place, Travis Gibb, Darcy Van Pulgees, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian Hold, Near Levy, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Jingo Baren, James Tyner IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Domstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Patrick Quill, Isaac Oren, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Subman Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Carl Kerschel, Rob Robert Marcella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brendan DePilst, Patrick Power, Declan Shelby, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Leona Kangas, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Stefan Hull, Philip Myra, Chris Butchall, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Demetriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwand, Vita Ayala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Matthew Groom, Jason Assey, Adam Bogert, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Brawley, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comic Star in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outros as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off-Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.